Assalamualaikum dan juga selamat petang. So, sambung kuliah kita. Okey, apa yang kita discuss hari ini adalah kita akan discuss mengenai skill in developing multimedia standalone application and learning object. So, untuk standalone ni benda yang kita tak perlukan, orang kata dalam bentuk aplikasi lain lah. Maknanya kita nak apa? Nak playkan dia tu, dia boleh play by itself. So normally dalam format .exe. Tetapi dalam format .exe ni biasanya kita dah tak guna lagi sekarang. Sebab apa? Sebab ianya adalah satu format yang selalu digunakan oleh virus sebab dia just self executable. Okay, perkara sekali adalah common uses common uses of multimedia production ni kita banyak. Business presentation, selalu kalau kita presentation business yang very big business lah, kita akan gunakan multimedia ataupun dalam kes ni animation. Sebab untuk membolehkan kita nak bagi gambaran kepada klien. So dia akan berikan satu bentuk orang kata impression. Berbanding jika anda gunakan hanya perkata-kata saja ataupun anda hanya gunakan visual, dan ianya kalau juga gunakan animation akan berikan kesan yang lebih tinggi. Sebab animation akan melibatkan berapa sense. First sekali penglihatan, so kita akan boleh melihat. So dia akan engage dari segi visual dan engage dari segi pendengaran audio, dan juga untuk animation tu. Animation ni sebenarnya adalah satu set of gambar-gambar statik yang disusun secara sequential, dan bila dia susunan itu betul, otak kita akan memberikan satu bentuk ilusi bahawa ianya bergerak. Itu adalah animation. So dia ada penglihatan, pendengaran dan juga kognitif lah. So otak tu proses, so dia akan lebih engaging. Dan certain situasi ianya lebih motivate lah. Ada user yang kenapa dia motivate untuk gunakan satu teknologi itu, sebab teknologi itu bersifat engaging. Dia engaging dan juga imaging, dua beza. Engaging macam you all sekarang tengah dengar ni, this is engaging. Dan kalau imaging tu, immerse tu you memang rasa you seperti berada dalam sistem tersebut lah. So main game tersebut tu lebih kepada immersive. So kalau kita main games, kalau main game kita guna handphone, so setelah kita dengar, kita lihat, dan mata kita proses animation tersebut, simulation, kita juga bergerak gesture. So itu yang menyebabkan dirangsang lebih banyak kita punya sensory, dan menyebabkan immersive tu timbul. Dan juga advertising kiosk. Kiosk ni dulu lah, sekarang pun rasa masih ada lah advertising kiosk tu. Dulu kita nak top up tu kita gunakan kiosk. Kalau kiosk tu just static, very static kiosk yang tak ada apa-apa, just ada menu, orang tak guna. Melainkan kalau orang akan guna lah benda yang static tu, mesin ATM lah. Mesin ATM macam mana static pun kita akan guna sebab kita nak keluarkan duit. So dia tak ada perlu elemen persuasion. So nak persuade user untuk guna, so kita gunakanlah animation. So satu kalau kita lalu di kios ni adalah yang mesin-mesin kecil atau berjalan yang pakai advertising. Kalau siapa pergi ke DSP tu, yang boleh check berapa nilai ke DSP, berapa anda punya caruman semua tu. So dia akan ada play certain animation untuk attract pengguna. Okay, games dah discuss tadi. Educational bagi tujuan training and tutorial. Okay, training and tutorial, maknanya untuk training dan tutorial ni adalah so bagi tujuan certain part yang kognitif, yang kognitif yang very orang kata susah nak difahami, yang orang kata tak boleh nampak dengan mata kasar. Contohnya ion, elemen ion, ataupun mungkin katakan atom, sel tubuh badan, benda yang susah ni memang tak nampak by kita punya mata tu. So untuk membolehkan ianya, orang kata kita boleh nampak benda tu, kita boleh bayangkan, kita gunakan animation. Contohnya ni adalah engine. So engine, mungkin anda pernah jumpa engine, ataupun mungkin tak pernah jumpa engine. So masa dalam kelas, bayangkan engine. So mungkin setiap orang tu engine nya berbeza. Setiap orang mungkin katakan dibayangkan enjin motor, dibayangkan enjin kereta, dia bayangkan serta-serta all kind of engine lah. Then bila kita nak synchronize tu agak susah. Contohnya kata kita nak bayangkan piston tu bergerak. So benda yang sangat sukar dan abstract. That's why kita gunakan animation. Okay. Saya lihat ada chat dulu. Junisko, okay. Al-Amin, new student?
Sir, good morning, sir.
So are you a
good
local?
afternoon.
Are you local or international student?
I'm international student, sir.
Okay, when did you register for this course?
I registered it last week.
Okay, last week. Okay, so you have to check either you have completed all the requirement for what I call it to join this course. You can check it with the coordinator. So where are you from?
I'm from Nigeria.
Okay, so I believe we have to speak in English.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, this is a multimedia authoring program. Sorry, I'm moving my mouse around because I have a number of display that you cannot see. I'm the only one that can see this display. So I have to move it around so that I can see what is inside the notes. Okay, multimedia authoring programs allow you to combine text, images, audio, video, animation into an interactive presentation. So as we had discussed before this, so what is actually the process of authoring? Meaning that we have a number of multimedia elements that we might need for the purpose of developing our courseware, or maybe learning courseware, or certain kind of educational purpose courseware. Then we combine it together. Then we create our own. Why we need our own version? Because of a number of things. First, in terms of pedagogical approach. You are the teachers, you are the lecturers, you are the ones is the instructor for that course. So you know how is the best way, the best the best approach to teach certain subject. So that's why you need to learn authoring. Because the issues now with education is that we are the teachers, but we are using the content that been developed by someone else. Or maybe the content been developed by expert, but might be the user, the student is not, not in line with the context of the course that been developed. Maybe the example is different. For example, maybe the software been developed in United Kingdom. They have a lot of snow there, and they have a lot of raining there. So maybe in Malaysia we don't. Malaysia, I believe also in Nigeria we don't have snow. So maybe the context is something else. It's not suitable with our local needs. Okay, and in multimedia authoring programming, we have to use scripting language to add interactivity. For using Animate, we are going to use ActionScript 3.0. So this is an example of authoring software, Adobe Flash. We are using ActionScript. Now Adobe had rebranded into Adobe Animate. So still using ActionScript. And Adobe Director is using Lingo, but the Adobe Director is no longer around. Okay, and media elements, we normally create it outside of the multimedia authoring program. We can have it from Pixabay if we are looking for copyright-free graphic. Look at Pixabay. So, but this is some, what I call it, they need still some attribution to the owner. So you have to read what is actually the attribution needed. And you also can use in Adobe Animate, we can use pencil and brush tool. When using the pencil and brush tool, we can create a vector graphic. And now we have, what I call it, drawing tablets. A drawing tablet is just a normal tablet, not as expensive as our normally used tablet. It's just a normal tablet, just a blank tablet without any display, just a USB connection. So you plug it into your computer or laptop. So you have the pen, so you can draw it. So it is much more easier for you to draw using this drawing tablet rather than using your mouse or your trackpad. Okay, this is we're going to discuss the type of graphic that is suitable for Adobe. Sorry, not suitable with Flash. This is suitable with Adobe Animate. Okay, first is file that have been produced by Adobe Illustrator. So Adobe Illustrator, it will produce graphic that is in vector format. We have two major formats, the bitmap and vector format. So for the vector format, it is much more, what I call it, flexible in terms of sizing. You can resize it freely without any reduction in terms of quality. But this is something that is not suitable to represent something that is organic. For example, a bird, fish, or human or character is not suitable to be represented by using vector. But for Photoshop, Photoshop is processing images that is from the bitmap category. So for the bitmap, what we have in it, we have some kind of depthness in our picture. So by having the depthness, we can give more sense of lively into the what I call the photo. So it's very suitable for something that is organic in nature, humans, fish, or anything is organic, and something that have a lot of what I call it, colors. So we're using Photoshop. But by the Photoshop is using bitmap. It's only for the bitmap images. And for bitmap images, they are bound to the principle of pixel. So once the pixel is not right, so the image will drop in terms of quality. Okay, the AutoCAD is normally not for mathematics students. AutoCAD is normally being used by engineering or TVET students where they design some kind of maybe a modeling engine model or car house model. Then the output is that can be used in Adobe Animate. And we have a number of others formats. This is very popular, GIF, JPEG, PNG, Flash Player, Windows Metafile, and Adobe XML graphic file. But normally what being used for this for our courses, normally we're using to use AI, PSD, GIF, JPEG, and PNG. So JPEG and PNG, JPEG is something that's focusing toward optimization of size. Okay, if you have some constraint with size, that in some situations you have to consider about the size, and if you have some constraint size, you have to use JPEG because JPEG is keep a balance between size and quality. The size in terms of the file size. And PNG is more toward a very refined graphic. If you don't have any problem with internet connection or the size of the file, you can freely use PNG. Flash Player, of course, the output normally with Flash Player. Windows Metafile and Adobe XML graphic files, we are no longer using that. Sometimes we use GIF and animated GIF. But for new generation of students, they don't really keen to have this kind of GIF and animated GIF because the GIF and animated GIF is something that's quite quality. The animation we produce is not very smooth because they are using a very low frame per second rate. So it's better for you to produce your own animation rather than using GIF. But if the GIF or you have some animation that is not a very not going to play a very vital role in your courseware. For example, this GIF is only for a side animation. Maybe you have some side animation at the bottom, the right bottom or the left bottom. Just maybe a globe that is spinning. That is okay. You can use GIF. But for the main animation, this is highly not recommended to use GIF anymore. Okay, so this is video supported by Adobe Animate. So we have QuickTime video for Windows, MPEG. Okay, for QuickTime is normally, before this, been used very popular in Macintosh. So Macintosh is using QuickTime, and then Windows is using FVI. This is at this moment, during this time, they are not going to integrate the format. So they become very territorial. So Windows is keen on dominating the market, and Apple is also thinking about dominating the market. Then around 2000 and I think 2020, 2015 or 2010, they start emerging. So now you can play QuickTime in Windows and you can play AVI in Macintosh. There's no problem. But MPEG is normally for all the devices. But the problem with MPEG is that for MPEG, you need a lot of converter. You need codecs. You need a coder and decoder because they have a lot of files. They have MPG, MI, M1V, M2P, M2T. There's just a lot of files that been under the category of MPEG. So you need the codecs, and sometimes the file might be not readable. It can be played. It can be played in your computer, but this is not readable by other devices. Maybe you send it to your friends, they cannot play it because they need codecs. And video for Adobe Flash, this is FLV and F4V. This is during during the golden time of Adobe Flash. During the golden time, even YouTube is using Adobe Flash. Now YouTube is using HTML5. So at the moment, they are using FLV and F4V. And this is the 3GP, 3GPP, 3GP2, 3P2. This is the old format for our video that been recorded by mobile devices. So you have your mobile phone. This is before. This is before when we have the technologies of 3G and 4G. So they are using the 3GP. Okay, this is why they moved from 3GP to now we are using MP4, because before we are having 3G technology, so we don't have what you call it, a very big requirement for our mobile devices. So just a very plain mobile devices, just what I call it, a moderate processor. This is actually not, we call it processor. At that time, we just call it a chip, and then just a small memory. Then suddenly we have 3G. Where with 3G, you have you can do a lot of things. You can send you can send what I call it, MMS. You can send you can start using WhatsApp, but at that time WhatsApp is not very popular. So then the what I call it, the manufacturer of smartphone realized that we need a very good hardware for our handphone. Now our handphone, we have 8 GB of RAM. We have a very good what you call it, a processor. Sometimes the processor is even better than what we have in our computer, and we have a big storage. We have 120 something gigabytes. We have 256 gigabyte up to 1 tera gigabyte. So when the hardware requirement the hardware is now good enough, so they migrated into MP4. So that's why we are using MP4 now. Okay, this is audio supported by Adobe Animate. This is nothing much to discuss. Just a quick, what I call it, a quick reference about the where MOV and Qt. The QuickTime belong to Apple, and the rest can be SND. Before this, SND is native to Macintosh. Then they stop it. They start using QuickTime. The same thing goes to SD2. Okay, and finally they have Wave, but with MP3. So MP3 is the latest one. Now we are using MP3. Wave is something that is not carrying voice. If you just have a very plain, what you call it as polyphonic sound, so you can have wave. But if you are transporting or something like song or something that has the element of voice, so you have to use MP3. Okay, so this is how to export. And nothing. This is we're going to make it what I call it hands-on activities on this at the end of our session, at the end of our lecture session with Animate. Okay, for mobile apps, there are two things that you have to consider. Where for mobile apps, you cannot use ActionScript either is ActionScript 2 or ActionScript 3. You have to use Air. So Air is for Adobe Integrated Real-Time. I don't remember it. But we have Air for iOS and Air for Android. Okay, when you are developing mobile apps, so now Animate has been evolved. Now we able to develop mobile application by using Adobe Animate. But the problem with Adobe Animate is that when you're developing for iOS, you only can have it for iOS. You want for Android, you have to make a separate mobile apps for Android. So this is the issue. You have to make two versions of mobile application. So that's why for now we are not really using the mobile application, using Animate to develop mobile application, unless if you're looking for a very big broad what I call it broad user, for maybe the majority of the user are now using Android. So you have no problem. If you're just going to develop for Android, no problem. You can use Animate. Or maybe you are using just for iOS, just for Apple products, no problem. But if your users have mixed devices, some of them are using Android, some of them are using iPhone, so you have to use another platform to develop your mobile application. Okay, any question regarding the format and everything? I believe no question. Okay, what is animation? So animation is what I call it as, this is a video, like a video, but it's not really a video. It's something that be animate. So what I mean by be animate is that it is a static images that been processed by our brain, our brain that make the animation. So this is actually a kind of illusion. So the sequence, when the sequence is right, so our brain creates the illusion. And actually what we did with animation is that we have it in timeline. So we control it in timeline. So later I will show you what is the timeline. Okay, this is the timeline in Adobe Animate. So this is our timeline. We have the display. I will show you the display of our Adobe Animate. So make sure you already have your Adobe Animate. So for now, we're just going, just a very brief introduction to Adobe Animate. Later, we're going to have a hands-on session. But I believe from the asynchronous session before this, you already develop your own version of the assignment. So I'm sure you already have your Adobe Animate. Okay, above here is the frame number. And below here is the layer. For example, you are setting your frame rate, and the frame rate is how many frame will be played in 1 second. For example, 10 frame per second. So in 1 second, your display will come from here to here. So in 10 seconds, we need 10 frame per second. So this 10 frame. And for humans, it's better for you to have at least 24 frames per second. That's the minimum requirement needed. If it's lesser than that, for example, 18 or 10, your animation will not be smooth. There will be jagged movement because our eyes can capture the movement is not smooth. Yeah, because the brain is not generating the animation needed. Okay, so this is layer, and we have a number of animation creation technique. We have frame by frame, twinning and sculpting. So this is frame by frame, meaning that for each frame, frame by frame, meaning that for each frame we put the images. So the images being played sequentially. So it will produce quite a good animation if the frame rate is good. But the problem is that with this technique, it requires a lot of technical skill, it requires a lot of effort, and of course you have to have a very big manpower. So maybe your team, you have around 5 animators. For it's just one animator, it would not be enough for you to complete the project unless you have a very long duration. For example, 2 years, maybe you can have only one animator, but it's just a very short duration of time. For example, 3 months, you should have at least 10 animators. I will show you what is the function of animators, what is the function of head of animators for each part of this animation. Okay, for frame by frame, we have the concept of keyframe, where a keyframe is that a frame in which the context is explicitly specified, different from a frame in which the content is interpolated between frame. Okay, for example, this is the frame. Okay, this is the frame. Okay, this is the frame. Here, the first one is the first keyframe. The second one is the second keyframe. So now we have these images of a horse is running. So this will be the first keyframe, and this will be the second keyframe. So in between this is what we call as interpolation. So this interpolation is the image between the 2 keyframes. So the keyframe is actually the fundamental movement. So the small movement is the frame between it. So what been did by animator, by head of animator or chief animator, the chief animator will draw the first and the second keyframe. So chief animator will deal with the keyframe. So for the junior animator or just the normal animator, what they did is that they're going to deal or to draw something that is between the 2 keyframes. The interpolation being did by this animator. So the technical skill of both animator and chief animator is very high. It's very difficult for us to draw a horse. I believe myself is that I also cannot draw a horse. So normally we are looking for outsource. For example, we have some designer, graphic designer, to help us with designing this. Okay. Okay, it's best suited for a complex animation, something that is very natural. For example, the movement of human movement, how you move from how you walk, or maybe birds are flying, or how fish is swimming, something that is very organic, very natural. For this, to make it a very smooth animation, it's better for you to use frame by frame. But by using frame by frame, it's increased file size more rapidly than twin. So I will discuss with you what is actually twin. Okay, sorry, we have two more in the lobby. I have to admit them. Okay, when we have more frame, for example, we have more frame. So if it's twinning, okay, twinning, I will show you later. If you have twinning is just 2 keyframe, and what I call the interpolation will be did by the computer. But if you are using frame by frame, each frame is storing its own value, its own file. Of course, it will increase in terms of file. And it requires more storage, but actually the storage is not very high. It's not up to some maybe 4 or 5 gigabyte unless you are working on a very complex animation. And for frame by frame, again, it is for natural movement, something that's organic, something that is living. It's better to use frame by frame. Okay, if we are dealing with something that's not living, just a very plain object, for example, you are dealing with shape, or you're dealing with something, a ball, maybe you want to change the color, then in this case, you can use a second technique where we call it as twinning. So the twinning is that the word twinning is coming from in between. So we look here, in between. If you remove in and be, it will become just twin. So that's how the term twinning is coming from. Okay, so this is how we're going to do it, but we will discuss it later. Okay, this is the twinning of Angry Bird, for example. We have a bird here. We're going to end it here. So maybe you're going to make it, I believe it is bouncing. It's going to bounce, something like this. Okay, just a very simple movement. So no need for frame by frame. If you're using frame by frame, no problem. But because this is something that's not lively, it don't have any effect. So maybe you're just wasting your time. You're using more effort to do it rather than by using twinning. So movement can be using twinning, or maybe it move. For example, we have the bird here. You want the bird to move here and change color from red to yellow, for example. It is just what I call it, a cartoon, not something that is really what I call it lively, because it's for Angry Bird. It's not really moving. No what I call it, no major movement is happening. So you want to transform it from one location to another location and change it from red to yellow, for example. You can use twinning. Or maybe you have another one. This is the red bird. We have the yellow bird, the one that is in triangle. So you can use twinning also. So by twinning, the red one will move, for example, maybe here, and it can change to the yellow one. So how it changed, that's been decided, been programmed by the software. So you're not going to deal with it. Or for example, you want the bird from small to move here and become bigger. That's also we can make it using twinning. Are you going to use something that's what called as opacity? Opacity meaning that it is clear, and then suddenly you want to change it to become a bit blur. This is opacity. That's also can be done by using twinning. So twinning saves you a lot of time, so you don't have to make it frame by frame. But twinning is highly recommended for something that is not lively, something that's not organic shape, or maybe simple cartoon, or what I call it, color. is better to use tuning. Okay, this is an example of opacity. So this is 100% opacity. Then it's become blur. Here maybe around 20% opacity. This is what we call as opacity. Also, you can rotate. For example, you want the bird to rotate. So you can use twinning or the shape, as I told you before this. Okay, the third approach is you're using scripting or programming. Okay, this is something like when you are going to have some kind of simulation, you want to simulate a thing. For example, you want to simulate when there's what I call it, a very popular experiment in chemistry. You mix two, what I call it, two aqueous. For example, this is our acid, this is the base. When you, what I call it, you mix it together, what's going to happen? So you want that kind of dynamic. So you're going to have to using scripting. And scripting is a very complicated one. I did it in my PhD a decade ago. It took me a very long time to make the programming. At that time, we are using ActionScript. We're not using ActionScript. I don't remember what is actually the coding I had used at that time. But it's very time consuming. But we need that in case you need a very what I call it dynamic or very what I call it, fluid experiment. So you need that kind of scripting. Okay, if you rely on fixed sequence of visual content on timeline, just use frame by frame or twin, up to you. Is this organic or not? But scripting, you cannot use you can use it, but it's a very complex thing, so it is time consuming. Always the same animation every time you play. Okay, frame by frame, twin. But for dynamic and interactivity, of course, you have to use the last one, where it's scripted. And if you require scripting, it's also scripted. But normally, even in mobile application, if you develop a mobile application using Animate, you can use scripting. We use a lot of scripting when we develop mobile application using Animate. Okay, the word required in creating the visual content for frame by frame is longest. Twin, of course, twin it will be what I call it, conducted by the computer, by the software, no time at all. Scripted is the shortest one because you don't have to draw it. But the problem is that the process of learning the scripting, the process of learning how to use the programming, that's a very complicated one. So you have to look at, even professional programmer, they are referring to open web based. For example, FlowStack. FlowStack is a very popular popular website for a programmer. So we refer a lot at FlowStack. When we have issue with our coding, we refer there. There will be some senior programmer to look at it and discuss it. It's very open source, very helpful website. Okay, we have organic motion. So frame by frame, organic motion, you can use twin maybe, but this is not really recommended. Charts of animation involve continuous motion that can be interpolated. So you have to use scripted, because for example, if you want to make sure that every input will produce a very different output, so you have to use it scripted. But if you don't have any problem, anytime you click the button, the output will be the same. You are free to use twinning. Okay. So any question? So I give you rest for another for 5 minutes. Okay, now we are going to discuss about animation frame rate. So for animation frame rate, okay, now I have stopped my video, so that you also can stop your video, so that we can, maybe some of you are using mobile devices, so we can save some bandwidth for you. Okay, for the animation frame rate is that, as I told you before, we measure it in frame per second. So for frame per second is that how many frames is going to be displayed in every 1 second. So it's actually what also we call it as the playback speed of the animation. And if it is too slow, the image will become, the animation will become choppy. And if too high, the computer is also choppy if the computer is not fast enough to process and display the frames. But this is for the issue before this. But now I think everyone, nowadays we have a very good performance computer, so it's not be a big trouble for you. And the maximum rate in authoring programming is not what I call it. This is no one very clear guideline. So, but normally we use it just 24 frames per second. So in 24 frames per second, at least you must have 12 images being displayed in every 1 second. So that is the basic, what I call the basic rules of the frame rate. Okay, for example, if you're using 24 frames per second, so for 1 minute of animation, you need 1,440 frames for 1 second. So if it's for 1 minute, if it's 10 minutes, so you have 10,440 frames for 10 minutes animation. So you have to play with it. If you have 30, it will be more. 50 will be more, but the quality is better. But for assignments, normally at least 24. I didn't really look at very smooth. That's just very, what I call it, basic movement of transmission for the animation, for the output of your animate. Okay, to speed up, in case you want to speed up, increase the frame rate. So if you increase the frame rate, for example, you have 1,000 frame. If you increase the frame rate, so the frame will be played faster. So you can make it, what I call it, the speed higher. If you want to slow down, just you have to reduce the frame rate. Yeah, this is example of frame, but we don't really play it. So if you, okay, this is, sorry, we're not going to play it. If we're going to play it, we're going to discuss about it. Okay, so this is animate. So now we are going to discuss animate. After this, we're going to going to discuss about interactivity. So this is a 5 main thing inside Adobe Animate that you need to understand. First is tool, second stage, timeline, property expector, and finally library. Okay, this is the stage. Here, when you open your Animate, so this is, I believe this is not Animate, this is Flash, but now it's recorded as Animate. So the first one, this one is the stage. Okay, for the stage, where we play the movie, where we play the Flash, we can play inside the Animate itself, or we can play inside our player. This is up to you, no problem. So you can change the background size, and you can change everything, the out layer or everything. Okay, but the most common issue is that how we are going to decide the size of our stage. So what is the size of our stage? Before this, the rules of thumb being used is that 800 times 600 pixel or 600 times 800 pixel. This is what's been normally used. But this is for the old time, not now, because at that time, there's still some user that are using CRT monitor. The CRT monitor is the big one, the monitor that's a very fat monitor. Before we have all the LCD and LED display, so we have the CRT for 800 times 600 is suitable for the CRT display. But now the technology has become higher. Some even laptop can display, can have a display of 2K display. So for 2K, we have number of resolution 720p. We call it as HD, high definition. And if we go to 1080p, we call it as full HD. This is almost double of the HD. And if you go to 1140, yes, 1140, this will call it as full, not full HD, sorry. This is 2K display. So we have computer that is displaying 2K display. Even, sorry, we have laptop that's displaying 2K display, and we even have some computer that can have 4K display. For 4K display, the resolution is double of the 4K, of the 2K. It's around 5 times higher than the full HD. So the resolution will be very big, very smooth for the user. But if we are developing something that is 4K, it will be a big problem for someone that's still using full HD. So my suggestion is that for your assignment, at least maybe you can use full HD or HD, but don't really go to for 2K or 4K display, because not everybody able to play your output. Okay, this is timeline and keyframe. So this is the timeline. So all the timeline is here. So this is the frame. And this is the layer. So we can adjust the layer. And if it's solid circle, if you look at the frame and you have a solid circle, this is meaning it's a keyframe. This is a circle, but the empty one, this is actually also a keyframe, but a keyframe without any content. We can put I will show you later how we're going to put our keyframe. Okay, this is the keyframe in our animate. This is not necessarily any specific rules how many frame should be you have, or how many frame you should have before you're having a keyframe. No, this is no certain rule about that. This is up to your own creativity, how you're going to use it. So for example, we can have the first keyframe at frame 1, and we can have the second keyframe at frame 5, and we can have it again at frame 10, 15, 20, and suddenly we can have it at frame 30. So normally, we can even have one freeway at first keyframe at the frame number 1, or the second keyframe at frame number 2. For example, you are displaying just a very plain text or very plain display. So for this, you just want it to be displayed just maybe for a very short brief of time. Then you want it to stop at second frame. So this you stop it at second frame, and you can have the next display. Then they will not proceed. If you're using stop command, you can use stop command to navigate between this animation. If you're using you put your stop command here at keyframe number 2, so the animation will stop at keyframe number 2. That's why how you can have very close keyframe. Or maybe you can have a very smooth animation, for example, for 2 seconds. So you have around 48 frame. So you have 48 frame, for example, here, and suddenly you want to stop at frame number 49. So you have another keyframe, you put your stop command there, so the animation will stop there. Or maybe you can have it loop. It will loop from frame 1 to frame 48 again and over again. So you can also do it. So that's why I said it, there is no specific rules how you're going to place your keyframe. Okay, for any non-keyframe, meaning that this is your keyframe. So this is your keyframe. So the frame between these, we call it as non-keyframe. Okay, for non-keyframe is actually the subsequence to the keyframe that might have the same content as the keyframe. For example, you have a picture here. So when it played for frame number 1 to frame number 4, you will have the same picture all of the frame. Or for example, you have the keyframe here and you have another keyframe at 30. For example, there's no keyframe in between it. So from frame 1 to frame 29, you will have exactly the same images. So that is what been explained by frame. So the keyframe is the key that display the main images. For the non-keyframe, the normal frame is normally we have exactly the same display as keyframe, but it can be different if we are using twinning. If you are using twinning, so in between this, we have a very long arrow. So the arrow is showing that there's this twinning process is happening. So the location of the image at the first keyframe might be different from what for each location at frame number 15. And it will also have a different location at frame number 25, for example. So if you see a very long arrow here, that means this is twinning, as I showed it before, meaning that the animation being produced, the animation being processed by the computer or the software itself. So this is a twinning process. Okay, any question with this concept? I have to look if there's any question. If no question, I believe everyone is everyone understood the basic concept. And this is how to create keyframe. So I will show it later to you. To convert a keyframe into a regular frame, just you can simply use delete, no problem. Okay, this is how to insert a frame. You can refer to this, what I call it, this notes for your hands-on session. Okay, next thing we have a property inspector. The property inspector is here. Once you open it, you have the property inspector at your right-hand side. If you don't see the property, you just can simply go to Windows and make sure that you tick the property so the property will be displayed. So it can be displayed either in floating mode. So floating mode meaning that it can be anywhere inside your display, or it can be anchored here. So normally it's here. Okay, the property inspector is display the information and properties that can be edited. For example, you want to change the name. You want to convert. You have an image, then you want to convert it into a symbol. For example, you have an image. You want to convert it into a button. So you can do it here using the property inspector. So the property exploiter also show the location, the location of the object. So if you want your object to be located a very specific place every time in every frame in your display, so you can use this property inspector to adjust the location. Okay, the location is here. Location is here, and this is the library. So it's library. The library function is that to store something, maybe something that you import. For example, you are importing an image into the anime. So when you have imported the image, it will be either on the stage or in the library. There's two modes of importing. First, import to stage. Second one is import to library. If you import it to stage, it will be automatically in the stage, but it will also in the library. If you import it to library, it will be in the library, but you can simply just drag it into the stage anytime you want it. Okay, so now I'm going to show you the animate. Okay, so this is the basic display of the animate. So mine is blank because I just reinstall it. I just installed the 2021 version. Okay, we have a number of basics, what call it, basic startup display. Can you have full HD or Android? 16:19 is actually the ratio of your display. So 16:19 is normally the ratio of your handphone. When you rotate it, your phone, you display it vertically. That is 16:19. Been the what call it, the resolution that been always by the laptop. Normally our laptop is using 16, 69. Or maybe you are going to develop something for iPad, for the iPhone, for the third and fourth generation. So this is the display. So we also have a lot of more preset. So this is the preset. I'm not sure you are seeing this or not. Yes, you see, you're able to see this. Okay, so you have a number of other setting. For very high, 1024 times 768. Low or medium, as I told you before, 800 times 600. This is what I call it, very optimal for the past, maybe past decade. Or height or standard video, or maybe you're going to make some what I call this, some content for iPhone. Everything is here. So which device? So using maybe first generation iPad or third generation iPad, or you want it to be displayed into an Android phone. But of course, Android is a very unique operating system. It's an open source, so it can handle a lot of devices. So maybe some devices are using 5:3 ratio, or 3:2 ratio, or 4:3 ratio, or 16:10. So you have to make sure which one is exactly the display of your user. Okay, for us, normally we can use very high. So you just click here. The frame rate by default is 24 frames per second. So maybe you can change it to 30, but at least minimum for the assignment, it should be 24 frames per second. And the ActionScript, the ActionScript is now ActionScript 3.0. There's no longer ActionScript 2.0. Now we're using ActionScript 3.0. So you just click create. This is the display. So a very nice display, and now it have a very clean display. So this is the stage. So you can just simply change the background. It's up to you. So this is the frame and the timeline. This is the property. So the property inspector is here and the library is here. So this is what is actually the basic display. In case you cannot see, for example, you don't see the properties, so maybe you don't have this display. This might be because here you look at window and you click properties, so you can get it here. And you can have it floating. So this is the floating mode, or you can anchor it back here. So up to you. The same thing goes to the timeline. You can float it here, or you can anchor it. So it's very hard to anchor it back, but normally we can just put it anywhere because normally the display is too big. And when the display is too big, you can resize it here. For example, you can resize it to 75%, but the display is still big. So normally when I'm working with it, I'm going to make it floating. It's easier for me to control all the layers here. Okay, the concept of frame and keyframe. So I believe you have made your hands-on session before this by using the video. So for the animate, I'm going to demonstrate everything to you. You can use our recorded video. You can use the self-instructional material. But I will show you to you the complicated one, how to make the quizzes, how to make the questions. That is quite a complicated part of the animate. So we're going to do it together. And for Dreamweaver, Dreamweaver is much more much more complex. It is not 10 times. I believe it is 20 or 30 times. Much more difficult than using Animate. So for Dreamweaver, we're going to make it hands-on for every part. Each part of it, we're going to make hands-on together. Okay, so how to insert keyframe is just very simple. For example, I'm using 30 frames per second. The display might be different for me because I'm using this black display. So just click here and then insert keyframe. So this is a very basic thing. So if you want to remove it, so you just clear frame. So this is no longer a keyframe. Or maybe you want to delete everything. So you want to delete maybe to make it shorter from 5 to 10. Highlight it, then you, sorry, where is it? Remove frame. Or you delete. Why it's not happening? There's something is wrong. Okay, but if you normally when you click it, it will become shorter, or you can just simply drag it here to here, and then you can delete everything. But I'm not sure why it can. I tried to use my delete button. I use remove frame. Okay, yes, now it's been removed. So you can simply, if you have display here, you have a display here, you can drag it into the front, you can make it shorter, then you can delete everything. So it's not deleted. Okay, so you can make it shorter. So remember, keyframe is the major frame that determines the major, for example, the major movement or the major display of your animation or your product. And the frame between it is normally basically the same display as what we have in the keyframe, just in case you are using twinning. So the shape will be, the shape or the image might be different there. Okay, so this is the basic introduction of Animate. For further detail, you can refer to the video inside the e-learning. And make sure you have Animate for your assignment. You really need Animate It's up to you. It's not exactly you must have Animate 2022. You can have Animate 2020, or you have can Animate 2031. The worst scenario, you can have the CX version, but this is not very highly recommended to use CX version. Okay, if there's no question, we take a break for 5 minutes, then we continue with interactivity. Okay, interactivity. Interactivity been defined by Morse in 1989. There's three what you call it, three categories of interactivity, and interactivity is based on the concept of interaction. So there's the first interactivity is that the interactivity between learner and teacher. The second one is between learner, and the third one is learner and content. So when you give your student, or you give your, for example, your research sample, your software, for example, you are doing for your research study, you're going to conduct maybe an experimental research, then you have your software, then you're going to check what is actually the interaction. So normally this is the three kind of interaction that we're looking at. So, and then we look at the the frequency of the interaction and how it influence the performance of your sample in terms of maybe achievement or some sort of skill. So we use these three, and in 1994, this is another kind of interaction being added by Hillman, Willis, and Gunawardena, where they said that they believe the fourth interaction exists. We call it as learner interface interaction. Why in 1989 there is no interaction between the interface? Because at this time, this is just a transition from using a book and using something that is being computerized. So if you are reading a book, of course you are going to interact with the book, right? So this is no kind of interactivity with the interface. But in 1984, the computer has become better, and now we can have a very colorful display. So now they can design the graphical user interface, or what we call as GUI or GUX. They can how we call it, can design it better, so we can have a very good interaction with the interface. So at this stage, the interface becomes standardized. So we decide what is actually suitable for our user, what is the basic symbol that might be understood globally, or what is actually the basic way how to interact. So we have the the back and forward button. So this is among the basic concept of interactivity between learner and the interface. Okay, for the learner and teacher, learner teacher refer to the interaction between student and the expert, or maybe in some cases, we don't use it as learner teacher, we use it as learner instructor. So learner instructor, we are not actually using teachers anymore, we use instructor. Yeah, for example, the best way of learning is that the lecturer or the teacher is just becoming the instructor. So I just give you instruction. For example, for just like last 2 weeks, we have the ASEC conversation. So I give you the situation. So you have to make discussion. You have to come up with the output. So this is actually what education should look like. The education should not be like what we are doing now, meaning that I'm talking and you're just listening. It's been proven as totally not efficient. But we can do nothing because a lot of students prefer to be just sitting and listening. So maybe that's different between us and some advantage. For example, if you went to Singapore or Australia or United Kingdom, they are using as instructor. So just opening the basic concept for the student and the student has to exploit. So you can remember it's better rather than just listening. And then it's the emailing form, including delivery or presenting of information, student guidance, student-teacher dialogue, feedback, and student encouragement. So what we mean by delivery or presentation of information, meaning that the learner have to present to the instructor what they had learned. For example, in our last 2 weeks session, so I give you the instruction, so you perform it, then you present it to me in our Padlet, what I call it, Padlet session. So this is what we mean by delivery and presentation of information. Student guidance, this is more toward guide in case you are doing your assignment and suddenly, so for example, in this class, we have 2 groups. So I believe we have 2 groups now. So the first group might have problem. So what should I do is that I just give you some guidance, not what I call example. So for example, I said maybe you can look at a number of theory in cognitivism. So I cannot give you exactly what is actually the theory. So you have to learn what are the theories in cognitivism and how you're going to implement it into your courseware. And student-teacher dialogue, feedback or student encouragement. And feedback is something that, meaning that if you have, I asked you something, how you're going to give feedback. This is basically what is feedback. Okay, and the second interaction is learner, meaning that when you interact with your peers in solving the assignment, so when you are recording your Google Meet meeting, so this is the learner to learner interaction. So how you change the information and ideas is what we call as learner to learner. And what's supposed to be in the learner interaction is the collaboration. So you collaborate with each other. There are 2 basic concepts. First is collaboration. The second one is cooperation. So what we mean by collaborate is that you have a task. I give you a task, so you are working together to solve this specific task. So this is collaboration. Meanwhile, for cooperation, I give you a task. For example, maybe you have to prepare a report on the best solution of authoring software problem. So what you did, for example, you have 5 members in your group. The first member is going to write about introduction. The second member is going to write about, for example, objective. The third one may be about the problem. The fourth one may be about the solution. And the fifth one, that is going to summarize everything and write about conclusion. So if you are doing your task like that, that's we call it as cooperation. So cooperation is not what I call it, not very effective. Because if you're corporate, so you're doing, for example, you're just doing the introductions. You're not going to gain anything about the solution because you don't do it. You just do the introduction. Or maybe you are just doing about the solution, but you don't get anything about the problem because you don't deal with the problem. That's why you have to collaborate. And in my assignment, that's why I asked you to collaborate, because you did in the assignment is the one that will be going to be asked in the final exam. So you have to collaborate so that you can gain significant knowledge and you can learn together to solve the problem. The second direction is learner to content. The direction meaning that the content is that what is actually the knowledge being gained. What most defines that education, a defining character of education, and without it, this cannot be education, is the content. So what is actually the content? Maybe, for example, the content might be about the gamification. So the gamification is a very popular thing in our education technology. So you discuss about gamification, what is actually the characteristic of the gamification, how you're going to measure gamification, or maybe how you're going to measure computational thinking. So that is how you interact with the content. For example, when you're interacting with your friend and you believe that you need to put computational thinking inside your courseware, and then you're going to explore the journal, the articles in Scopus or Web of Science, for example, and you got article from Wings. Wings is a very popular pioneer in terms of computational thinking. So you read her thesis, you understand it. So this is the learner to content direction. Ultimately, the content direction result in the changes in learner understanding, learner perception, or even cognitive structure of the learner minds. So maybe before this, you don't have any idea what is actually computational thinking. You don't have any idea one of it is about abstraction in computational thinking. And and we have another thing is algorithm. You don't really understand what is abstraction, what is algorithm. But once you interact with what I call it, the journal, the paper written by Wing, so you understand, you have a new idea, you have a new perception about how a software, how a courseware should be designed. So this is why I call it as the changes in understanding, perception, or cognitive structure. Or for example, the changes in terms of mental model. For example, maybe you never ever in your life you see what I call it, for example, lung. Maybe you heard there's an organ called lung, but how lung look like, you never have idea about it. But suddenly you read you're using a software that explain about lung. For example, maybe how about the COVID-19 is infecting a lung, a human lung. So you can understand the basic concept of lung, how lung look like, what is actually the main component inside the lung, and how the lung is functioning. So this is the mental model. Before this, you don't have any idea, then suddenly you have some imagination or some idea about the lung. So this is what we call as a mental model. Or learner interface. Okay, learner interface as interaction between the learner and the, what I call it, the information, how the information been delivered, how we design it. This is learner interface. Students must be able to interact with the technology before they can successfully interact with the content, instructor, and other learners. Okay, for example, how we can use our smartphone. For example, maybe you can imagine that we go back to 2010. In around 2010, the smartphone is not really something that's as common as now. So suddenly, I give you an iPhone, for example. There's iPhone in 2010. So because how Steve Jobs had designed the interface, so you don't have to look at any manual. You don't have to learn anything. You know how to interact with an iPhone. So this is an example of learner interface interaction. So that is what causing Apple to succeed in dominating the market, because they have a very good interaction design. And if you produce a very good courseware, you can have a very good theory, you can have a very good flow of idea delivery, but you don't have a good interface. So it might be very difficult for your sample or for your student to understand your software. And at the end, your software is not going to deliver any significant changes into the mental structure or the cognitive of the user. Okay, development of multimedia courseware instruction. Okay, this is the interaction. Just so you just can read it. Okay, look at, maybe we can look at some major thing. Okay, this is no major thing. For the learning contents, we have something we call as analytic. So in analytic, you can understand what is actually the student or the learner is doing in our, mostly the analytic is inside a website, so that we can understand which part of the website or which part of the courseware is actually giving the most impact to the learning process. So this is what we call by what we understand by learning analytic. Okay, this is the interactivity, basic interactivity. First, the level of interactivity is, for example, key press, mouse click, dragging, typing, drawing, and talking. So this is the kind of interactivity. You can use button, hotspot, drag and drop, pull down menu, text entry, try limits and tries time. Okay, try limits and try times. You can make it in animate. So this is what we call as gamification. For gamification means that we put the element of gaming inside our software, so it will be interactive or engaging for the user. Even in some cases, online banking. Some online banking is using gamification to attract the user. But in Malaysia, I believe we don't really have this kind of gamification. Okay. The rest is in the e-learning. You can self-practice in learning.